Hey guys, this is Kritesh and welcome to TradeBen's YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to discuss 3 of my favorite personal finance books to develop a successful investing mindset. So if this is something that you are interested in, then please watch this video till the end. The first one is Think and Grow Rich. Now, what I like the most about this book is its title, Think and Grow Rich. It's not saying work hard and grow rich or work to grow rich. Although I understand that it's important to work hard, but just working hard is not enough to make you rich. Now, you can find a lot of workers working in mines or factories or blue collars in automobile companies or manufacturing companies. So, all these people work very hard. They do a lot of physical work, but compared to the salaries of their managers, all the CEOs or the management team, they are getting not even 1/100th of it. So the CEOs and all the big management team, they do not do a lot of physical work, but they think a lot about the future company's prospect and or making all the important decisions. And that's why they are able to make 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000 times more than those people who are doing just hard work. And that's why I like the title of this book, that is Think and Grow Rich. So, Think and Grow Rich is 1930s classic and it is still a best-selling book in 2019. So, all the concepts in this book has been time tested for the last 8 decades and all the principles are still valid. Now, this book was written by Napoleon Hill on the suggestion of Andrew Carnegie, who was a very successful businessman and one of the richest person in United States. So, Andrew Carnegie proposed Napoleon Hill to interview 500 of the most successful and rich person of the 20th century. He offered to provide the fund for traveling and all the other expenses for interviewing those personalities. Overall, he wanted Napoleon Hill to study the key characteristics that makes all those people rich and successful. So it took almost 20 years for Napoleon Hill to interview all the 500 successful personalities. He interviewed people like Henry Ford, JP Morgan, Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, etc. And after doing all this study, he summarized the different concepts learned from all these people using 13 concepts in his book Think and Grow Rich. Now, I'm not going to discuss the 13 concepts used in this book as it will spoil the fun of reading it. But two of my favorite chapters from this book was first of auto-suggestion and second was burning desire. So these are two of the favorite things that I learned from this book, and I will heavily recommend you to buy a copy of Think and Grow Rich because the concepts that you are going to learn in this book is you are not going to find it anywhere. So the first personal finance book that I will recommend you to read is Think and Grow Rich. Now let's move to the second one. So the second book that I would recommend you to read is The Richest Man in Babylon. So this book was also written in 1920s, I think 1926, and this is also a classic personal finance book. Now this is one of my favorite book because the concepts described in these books are in the form of stories. So you can find a lot of stories in this book from the Babylonian time. A few of them are The Richest Man in Babylon, The Goddesses of Good Luck, The Gold Lender of Babylon, The Camel Trader of Babylon. So these are different stories discussed in this book. One of my favorite story from this book was about a Babylonian slave. Slave was generally a person who was owned by their master, and he was extremely poor and has a lot of debt. However, later he learned about the concept of gold, that is how to save and how to invest, and using all those concepts, and later he became the richest man in Babylon. So this is one of my favorite story from the book. Now there are a lot of concepts discussed in this book, but one of the concept that I particularly liked was the concept of pay yourself first. So this concept basically say that whatever money you make from your business or from your job, keep a portion of that money for yourself. So let's say you are making 1 lakh rupees per month. So out of that, save 10% only for yourself. So this 10% of amount, you're not going to give it to anyone, not to your landlord, not to a restaurant owner, not to an automobile company to buy a bike or car, and not to anyone else. This 10% is only for yourself. You have worked hard to earn that money and you are not going to give that money to anyone else. You are going to save that 10% to keep it only for you. You can later invest that money, but still the money is only for you. Now this is a very good concept for those people who are struggling to save money. By understanding that you own a portion of the money that you earn, that is, you have to save a portion of the money only for yourself, and this can help you to save money. So this is one of the concepts that I learned from The Richest Man in Babylon, and apart from this you can find many different concepts in this book, and I would definitely recommend you to read The Richest Man in Babylon. Now let's move to the third and final personal finance book that I would recommend you to read. So the third and final book that I would recommend you to read is Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. So this was one of the first serious book that I read about personal finance during my freshman year in college, and it was an eye opener for me. And by reading this book, I understood the importance of financial education, why you need to understand finance, why you need to understand how to make money, how to save money, and moreover how to invest your money. So these are the few important things that I learned from this book, and this was definitely the eye opener for me. And for all the college kids and for all the youngsters, I will definitely recommend you to read Rich Dad and Poor Dad. Now in the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, the author Robert Kiyosaki has two fathers. No, not exactly two fathers. One was his real father, who was a highly educated person and a government employee. On the other hand, the second one was his friend's father, who was not that much academically educated, but he was very expert in financial things and he was building his own empire. Now Robert Kiyosaki describes that the lessons given by his rich dad and his poor dad were totally contrasting. For example, his poor dad used to give him advices like to study hard, get a degree, get a job, have a stable job, get married, and have a stable life. On the other hand, his rich dad gives him advice like to develop financial education, to learn about finance, to start investing in assets, to start making businesses. And at a very young age, Robert Kiyosaki decided that if he want to get rich, he should listen only to his rich dad. Now there are a lot of good concepts described in this book, but here are three of my personal favorite concepts from Rich Dad and Poor Dad. First, always invest in assets. So assets are those things which bring money in your pocket. For example, if you invest in businesses, if you own a business, or you invest in real estate, properties, paper assets like stocks, bonds, etc. So these things that will bring money back to your pocket, and these can be considered as assets. On the other hand, the things that takes money out of your pocket, these can be considered as liabilities. For example, if you live in a very fancy house for which you have to pay a lot of maintenance charges, then it can be considered a liability. Again, let's say you have a very fancy car which give a very low mileage and you have to spend a lot of money in the petrol, diesel. So again, it can be considered as a liability. So the rich dad suggested Robert Kiyosaki to only invest in assets, that is those things which bring money to your pocket. Now the second concept that I liked in this book was poor work for money. On the other hand, rich makes their money work for them. Now if you look at most of the people, they have a 9 to 5 job and they work 10 hours every day, 5 days straight in a week. So they work for 50, 60 hours and they work only to get money. They might not be even passionate about their work. On the other hand, if you look at the rich people, they work on their own businesses, their startup, they give employment. They do not work for money, but they make their money work for themselves. So this is again a basic difference between rich and poor. And third important concept that I learned from this book was poor have expenses, middle class have liabilities, and rich invest in assets. So if you look at the poor people, they have a lot of expenses, but they do not make that much income, and that's why they are always going to be poor. Second, if you look at middle class people, they have a lot of liabilities. They invest in things that they cannot afford. And third, if you look at rich people, they invest in assets. They own their own business. They invest in real estate. They invest in stock market, mutual funds. So all these are assets. And this is the basic difference between poor, middle class, and rich. So these are the various concepts that I studied from Rich Dad and Poor Dad, and it is definitely one of my favorite personal finance book. So these were three of my favorite personal finance book. The first one was Think and Grow Rich. The second one was The Richest Man in Babylon, and the third one was Rich Dad and Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. So that's all for this video. I hope it was useful to you. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to this channel for more interesting investing videos. This is Kritesh signing off.